Welcome to South Carolina at the Voice of College Football. This is episode 65. I'm your host, Walker Gaskins, and I'm pleased to be joined by Chad Smith from the Oklahoma channel with the Voice of College Football Network. Chad, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Of course, I was really looking forward to this matchup. You know, we're both high on Oklahoma. We were talking about it right before we started the show. Firstly, though, for those who are watching, if you haven't already, subscribe to the South Carolina channel, to the Oklahoma channel on YouTube and wherever you can find them. Some great content being put out from both channels, and we look forward to continuing our coverage throughout the college football season. And if you want more than just weekly shows here at the Voice of College Football for South Carolina, follow me on X, WGSports_CFB, the same username for Instagram as well. But Chad, definitely one of the matchups I'm a little more nervous about for 2026, and that is South Carolina versus the Oklahoma Sooners. In general, how are you feeling about this matchup?
Yeah, well, I'm hoping it's not a repeat of the 24 matchup at all. More so last year's. South Carolina is a team that I think is a dark horse to do really well, not only in the SEC but overall. You got a lot of returning talent. Anytime you have a really talented quarterback that has a prove-it year like Lenore Sellers does, it's always scary, especially whenever he has a defense that he's going to have. And one thing I'm interested in from you is how you see that defense kind of improving over last year. But I think for Oklahoma fans, it's an exciting year because it has all the positive indicators of a team that should be really, really good, as many SEC teams do this year. But Oklahoma has 61% of their returning offensive production coming back, or defensive production coming back. They have 71% of their offensive production coming back. It is third most in the SEC on defense, the most in the SEC on offense. The scary thing, I guess, is that Georgia was the youngest team in the SEC. They won the SEC, and they lead the most defensive returners and are second to Oklahoma in offensive returners. So you look at the indicators of, what do you need to be good again, or to be good? Experience, you need talent, and you need really a bunch of guys that have the ability to work off that experience as well. There's some questions I know we'll get into on the team, but really excited, and not only that, but for the South Carolina matchup as well.
Yeah, it feels like for a lot of teams in the SEC, Oklahoma and South Carolina included, there are a lot of positive indicators, like you said. And it does feel like you said a prove-it year for Lenore Sellers. It feels like the same in a lot of ways for John Mateer. A massive topic of conversation coming over from Washington State with offensive coordinator Ben Arbuckle, especially that early Heisman buzz, derailed by that broken hand. So now that he's 100% healthy, back for year two, and Ben Arbuckle's offense here in Oklahoma, what's kind of the conversation / expectation with Mateer? Because, it feels like the biggest issue is, yes, he has a great ability on the ground, that dual threat ability, had 400 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns, threw for nearly 3,000 yards last season, but 14 touchdowns through the air to 11 interceptions. You got to work on the turnover. So what's kind of the conversation expectation for Mateer in year two in Oklahoma?
I think you hit it pretty solid on the head there. There's a belief that, or a kind of a debate on what was the issue last year on offense. Was it scheme? Was it, lack of run game? Was it kind of all created a hydra of just things that would go wrong at the wrong time. And it turned into a John Mateer make plays for us and do whatever you can. And for the first few games, he was able to do that. Now, however difficult it is to play quarterback in the SEC, it's made X amount of times more difficult when you get 3 titanium screws put in your throwing hand. So I don't think anybody would sit here and say that helped him at all, or that's not a reason why there was some struggle in his game. However, anyone being fair, I think would also say that there were times when John, injury or not, made bad decisions. The Alabama pick six comes to mind at the forefront of the mind. But there were also other times whenever there were, you look at an Arbuckle, also has a prove-it year kind of that things were schemed wide open and John just missed it. I'll never forget watching the LSU game. Luckily, Oklahoma ends up winning that game, but he has Caden Helms on 3rd and 2, and we were on our own 30-yard line, and he has him in a flat. A perfect play call, schemed wide open by Arbuckle, and Caden Helms has 60 yards to run. Now he won't run all that because he'll get caught, but he has probably going to get 30 yards in that, and John throws it off his back shoulder, not even close. And it's one of those where you got to hit the layups. You got to hit those easy throws. So for Oklahoma fans, and for me personally, I'm more interested in not the athletic traits that John has and not the skill traits, but how does his mind work? Is he making the easy decision? Is he making the correct decision? That's what I'll be more impressed seeing as I watch John early in the year, especially leading into the Michigan game.
It's funny you say all the things you say in the aspect that it's sounding a lot like Lenore Sellers
Yeah.
when it comes to some of that turnover issue and really that kind of mental aspect of playing quarterback rather than the physical abilities. Because Mateer and Sellers obviously are physically outstanding, some of the best in the SEC as well as the country. But one thing I want to ask is how has that gone throughout the offseason? Because the offseason for South Carolina, you get a new offensive coordinator in Kendall Briles, a college-style offensive coordinator that really is supposed to elevate Lenore Sellers' game and really simplify it. And throughout spring ball and as we head into preseason camp, all the indicators have been that it has got simpler and easier for Lenoris in the offense. Would you say the same thing about John Mateer? What have you heard since spring ball and throughout the summer?
Yeah, Arbuckle mentioned there's going to be big changes, he's going to change things on the offense. Kevin Wilson is another guy that has Oklahoma fan will know him. He was the offensive coordinator in the Sam Bradford years, and he was formerly Tulsa's head coach. He went from making about $100,000 a year as an offensive analyst to now, his salary's been increased to $500,000 a year, and he's the I believe like senior offensive analyst now. Senior offensive analyst. So obviously he's going to have an impact on how we're really going to be calling the game. But for John, Brent Venables mentioned in a couple press conferences where he said, John came to me and said, I got to be better at the X's and O's part of the game. And he spent time with Brent learning keys, learning pre-snap reads, learning the basics and really kind of drilling those down. Because, similar to Lenore, you would say the talent's there, that he can make any throw he wants. He has all the skills to be maybe NFL, who knows, but at the college level, to be as good of a college quarterback as you need to win any game that you play, and that includes a national championship. And for John, it's really just, can he make the easy plays, and can he just take what's there instead of trying to make the home run throw or make the home run play every time. Now to defend him a little bit, Oklahoma's offense was in a position last year such that he had to be that guy. A lot of OU fans I know got frustrated with him sometimes in the will for him to make the best play or try to make this All-American play. But for a lot of it was if John didn't get us any yards running, and you look at the Texas game, even our biggest run that game was him just breaking a play. Now I think they had a holding penalty because Texas gets those kind of calls when they beat us. But John had to do that a lot, but he definitely has to be better in the decision-making aspect of the game and in the mental side of it. And to his credit, he has said that multiple times, and it seemed to have been a focus in the offseason.
You bring up another similarity. Apparently Oklahoma fans had with John Mateer that, it felt like Lenore Sellers had, is he trying to put the team on your back and basically be Superman. And I'd say one aspect for South Carolina specifically was we couldn't get the run game going. I mean, Rasul Faison, Oscar Attaway, it just wasn't working. Now you want to whether blame the offensive line, the offensive court.
Spent with him, they either more injured or there wasn't that progression that you would see in a different under maybe different running backs coaches, but it became a recurring theme. And for me, there are guys on the roster that have the talent to be really good, like a Torrey Blaylock, for example. He showed really good things early in the season, and he gets a shoulder injury, and he has to sit out a couple games. Xavier Robinson has obviously the breakout at the end of the 24 season. Last year, he was supposed to be our number one guy. He struggles with injuries again, and we really just haven't had a guy that we can say, hey, here is our guy that we're gonna give the ball to, and he's gonna be our position. We just didn't have a guy that could line up and actually block somebody on the edge and also go out for passes. And really, we only had one that could really go out for passes consistently. We had some injuries and some unfortunate things there, but the reality is the reality. We had a converted linebacker that did his best, but at best is an H-back trying to play linebacker, and we couldn't line up in 12 personnel. We couldn't line up with a two-type formation at all. So we were very predictable on third and short. And when you're predictable, you have to try to find other ways to get mismatches. We try to get too creative, and we do things that you just didn't need to do on short down situations. And just since being able to run the ball and be consistent on the offensive line, for me, has been the most exciting part. And you hear a lot of things right now out of camp and out of what has been spring workouts and winter workouts, and it's been like this offensive line's different. You had a guy for Oklahoma go to SEC Media Days, and Eddie Pierre-Louis, who was a 6'3", 325 pounder, was 300 pounds out of high school, ran the 100-meter dash for his high school team.
From Arkansas, and Amarian Harris was able to jump in and replace the guy who lost to the NFL draft. And how do you think they'll face up against a pass rush with Dylan Stewart, with either it's going to be Caleb Herring or probably Julian Walker or maybe Anthony Addison, and of course some guys on the interior as well.
Yeah, I think that it's hard to know how Coach McCullough will run the running back room. I'm not going to act like I was key to how he ran it at Notre Dame. I know that he stuck with obviously guys like Love and those kind of players. And when you have a running back like that, it's hard to come off of them. DeMarco Murray had a belief, or I don't know if it's a belief or a tendency, I would say, and you would hear a former running back like Toby Walker talk about it, where it was hard to know what to expect. And I think for running backs particularly, that can be an extreme detriment. He would have a game where you would have 100 yards rushing, and then you may only get 2 carries and only a couple plays the next game. And it was hard for them to really know what they needed to do to have consistent opportunities on the field. Coach McCullough, I hope, is a guy that runs with the hot hand. We have running backs that are multi-purpose that can do run up the middle and on the outside and have soft hands out of the backfield. So guys that I'm really excited about. And then on the so in general, I think it is going to be if the trend continues, it'll be running back by committee for Oklahoma, but hopefully a running back by committee that tends to stay with a hot hand more than not. And then on dealing with Dylan Stewart, is there a guy that can just deal with him? I don't know. I guess I don't wish injury on anyone. He had to come out of the OU game last year, which, listen, at the time when I knew he was going to be okay, I was like, thank goodness. I was happy. 66, our right tackle, had to go up against him, and he was really excited about that. We knew his parents, and he was really excited for the challenge. And we didn't get to see him. I think he played 6 plays, and then he had to come out. Dylan Stewart did against OU. But,
yeah.
Look, when you get new players that transfer into the SEC from other conferences, the biggest thing is the adjustment in just how the speed and level of play. The one thing that I'm encouraged by is that Arkansas had a good offense last year that scored points on good defenses, and Harris was a part of that. And now he's coming over to Oklahoma. It's not going to be a guy that's going to be surprised by the size, speed, or athleticism of the defenses he faces. There are going to be a lot of familiar faces across from him. And that has to translate into something that is beneficial and that helps him. How much that translates, I don't know. But it's hard for me to see how that wouldn't for me to see how I wouldn't want that instead of a guy coming from, say, a Pac-12 or Pac-10, one of those schools.
Yeah, certainly. And so it seems like you feel pretty good about the trenches. South Carolina is more of if you want to be on the pessimistic side or kind of more neutral side, you need to see it to believe it. Hasn't really happened to a high level that we are hoping for under Coach Beamer just yet, but I do think that will change for this year. But I wanted to turn back around to the wide receivers real quick for this last offensive question for you. I mean, you talked about earlier, John Mateer had to make a lot of highlight plays to keep you guys in a lot of games. And it seems like most of the time it was to Isaiah Sategna III whenever he was making those plays downfield after a pretty big 2025 season, nearly 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns off of 67 receptions. But Oklahoma, you bring in guys like Trell Harris. I think he came in from Virginia, Parker Livingstone from your guys' favorite opposing team in Texas. What's the dynamic like for this wide receiver room as you head into preseason camp? And are there any other names that USC fans should be watching out for in terms of your passing attack?
Yeah, so a lot of excitement again for that position. There's always excitement when you get a guy like Parker Livingston that was a roommate with Arch Manning and knew him really well to come to play at Oklahoma. Trell Harris is obviously the name that most people were excited about. Obviously UVA transfer, but someone who was really, really electric for them. Obviously, you could see the athleticism. He was a level above where all the defenders were, especially when he had the ball in open field. You look at how we used Deion Burks last year, and I think that you're going to see a lot of the same things with Trell Harris. He dealt with some injury issues or just some kind of bugs in fall camp or in spring camp, and developed and became a big time player. But I got couple guys that people are excited about is Manny Choice from Lancaster. He's going to be a sophomore, 6'4" guy, 210 pounds, and then Elijah Thomas was the Oklahoma Football Player of the Year, Gatorade Football Player of the Year at a high school, big time name. Someone who all the football players will tell you is the best athlete on the team. Didn't get a lot of time last year, but is a guy that if you're progressing like you should with the talent he has, he should become a guy that is going to get maybe not starting minutes, because hopefully your wide receiver room is that good with the older guys that you don't need it, but should be getting enough minutes to show that he is a guy that's going to make an impact.
So it sounds like there's a lot of things to watch out for on the offense, but I think it is, I guess, as overlooked the offense is, it's partially because all the attention is just going to this defense. And one of
Mm.
the storylines I've thought was interesting because, I'm not a personally, I think Brent Venables is, a great guy, but from a college football perspective, he used to be a coordinator for
Mhm.
Clemson. So not exactly the big fan, but I mean, there's no doubt he's a great defensive mastermind,
Sure.
right? And something that I've actually kept, one of the things I've kept track of, I think, is a lot of people over the years, especially Oklahoma fans, is 2024. He's not the defensive play caller, and obviously the 2024 season wasn't exactly the most satisfying outcome. But then he takes over defensive play calling duties last season, and the unit becomes one of the nation's best. So, from a general standpoint, right now, do they look even more dangerous this year? Are there any kind of gaps left by any of the departures as you head into this season? Like, what are you thinking from a bird's eye view about this defense?
Yeah, I think from a starting 11 perspective, it's going to be the best defense he's had at Oklahoma. I think the reason why, the only thing that gives you cause to pause if you're an Oklahoma fan is what made OU so good last year was that they were subbing in, especially along the defensive line. I mean, 6 guys deep that were all elite level talent. I mean, they were subbing in and Dominic Williams, who's on the Arizona Cardinals right now, Grayson Halton, who's on the 49ers, and even a guy like Marcus Strong later in the year that came on, who just transferred to Clemson. You were very, very deep along the defensive line. Now, I'll still say that I think Oklahoma in the starting 11 will have the best defense in the SEC. I will take their defensive line, even lacking a guy like Dylan Stewart. I'll take their defensive line over anybody's. I'll take their linebackers over anybody's. You're going to have a hard time convincing me there's a better duo than Eli Bowen and Cortland Guillory. Safety might be the biggest question mark for me, but even then, you have a fourth year guy that's going to be a third year starter, and Peyton Bowen that's coming back, and a guy like I just lost his name. 25 for Oklahoma, and that's going to bother me now that Boganowski. Oh, I was going to go crazy.
Yeah,
Mike Boganowski, who's going to be a big hitter for us. They have talent everywhere, and not only that, you add a Cole Sullivan into that mix. You add a lot more, even more experience from the younger guys. It's just another year where Brent's going to have a lot of talent to work with. And specifically talking about defensive play calling. My dad was a def coordinator for 30 years at every level but the NFL. So, and he coached OU in the 90s and all that. But there is not that is the greatest era or anything, but there is a knack for some coaches just to have a feel for the game, which sounds cheesy and sounds like something that you just say whenever you don't have a point to get to. But I'd say that only because Brent Venables has proven time and time again when he is the guy that is responsible for making the calls when they need to be made, he shows up and he makes them. There have been a few times when his defenses have been shredded. One, I guess, LSU in 2019, which shredded everybody. So it's not like that's too big of a mark or demerit on his record. But for us in Oklahoma, it's another year where you're seeing talent come back, and I'm happening in each position group as well. But and you see a coach that has now a full class in their fourth year that has worked with him every year going up to this. That's going to be extremely confident going into this season as well.
Very excited about this defense. We were talking earlier on the show. For my personal preseason SEC poll, I have Oklahoma finishing third in the SEC, right below Texas and Georgia, right above South Carolina, which I have them at fourth. And it feels like you guys obviously, I think, as a whole, have one of the best defenses. I think your offense can be one of the best offenses in the SEC, but it just feels like you have those names that when it's going to be a close game in the fourth quarter, 1-score game, you're up 4, your defense needs to make a stand. It feels like you have those guys. Like South Carolina has Dylan Stewart, and I'd say Taylor Wine has been a guy that really stood out to me. I think I was familiar with him after the breakout season he had last season, but during SEC Media Days, he really caught a lot more respect for me just because I finally got to kind of hear from him and see who he is as a player. And that's a guy who was named second team All SEC. And I think he had like 7 sacks last year, a forced fumble, a pass deflection. Can you tell us about the journey he's had throughout really this past season, throughout the offseason? And is he kind of that leader, that marquee guy for you guys on defense?
I would say he and a guy like David Stone in the middle, a defensive tackle, are probably your two. And Kip Lewis, those three will probably be your 3 marquee guys coming into this season. that are going to be the big names. Yeah, Taylor Wine, not only did he surprise, a lot of the football world last year, but Oklahoma fans as well. He's a guy that everyone loved. He's just a football guy. You love hearing him talk and just seeing how he acts and the way he goes about just his business. And it is a fun thing to see him do interviews and to see how energetic he is and all that. And I loved him in SEC Media Days as well. But yeah, he has been someone who I didn't think he was going to be what he was last year. I was obviously pleasantly surprised. But he was, especially when you look in the Alabama game, you look at the consistency he had. One of the questions with that is you have a guy like R. Mason Thomas on the other side, right? Like Dylan Stewart, the counterpart to Dylan Stewart's going to look on probably better in some games than he actually is because of the attention that Dylan Stewart gets. He's going to get more one-on-one matchups than Dylan Stewart is because of the extra blocking he's going to get, more free runs. The question now is when they know you're the guy, can you still be the guy? And I think that's where you go from being really good to elite. David Stone's had to answer that question and answered it. The same with other defensive tackle that I can't believe I'm forgetting, Jaden Jackson. It's not barring another district court making another decision, I guess. But there is a prove-it year for him, and someone I'm really excited to see is PJ. Can he be that guy? If you love Dragon Ball Z, you'll know what a Super Saiyan is. Danny Okoye is built just like one. He's going to be on the other side, probably a starter for at the right edge position, and is someone who is like all first team off the bus would be the most intimidating person you could have. I mean, just muscles on his muscles. It's just crazy. Yeah. So guys like that, I'm really excited for, and that'll help Taylor Wine obviously have hopefully another really good year.
Yeah, one quick 2 comments here. Firstly, we got a boomer.
Oh, it's up to you.
Yep. And then she also said, Owen Heineke.
Yep. Owen Hine.
Yep. So is Owen Heineke a guy we should be watching out for as well?
Oh, yeah. I can go through the whole defense. I thought we were just doing D-line, but absolutely. Oh, okay. No, Owen Heineke is he's another guy like kind of Taylor Wine came on out of nowhere. Owen Heineke, for a lot of people, did. He was a lacrosse All-American out of high school, played at Ohio State as fresh cut for literally, I think, 12 minutes of game time, 16 minutes, or not even that, maybe less than that. I can't recall. We all became experts in this when he had one of the district courts hold up his injunction. So, but that one was the correct ruling. That was a good one. The other ones that are bad, in my opinion. No, but Owen Heineke is another just football guy that is a playmaker. He got big sacks against Michigan, Bryce Underwood. He's the one that got the fumble Tennessee that R. Mason Thomas ran all the way back. He's just someone who consistently ends up in the right position for whatever reason that is. I don't really care. He's there, and that's what we need. Kip Lewis, again, it's hard for me to imagine a better linebacking duo, and maybe that's just because obviously I'm an OU fan, and maybe most teams feel this way. But someone like Owen Heineke and Kip Lewis on the same team, and then you pair that with a Cole Sullivan from Michigan, who was one of their best three defensive players last year, is a scary thing, I think, for opposing teams. But Kip Lewis is the energy on the team. He's the guy that is running and jumping up and down on the sidelines. T and I had him on our podcast recently. You've got to interview him. Big Star Wars guy. Love that. Awesome dude. But is just a really, really intelligent player, but he mixes that with an athleticism and a grit and a fight that is rare to see in college players. And my wife likes to say there are people who like to play football and there are people who like to be football players. Some like to have the bag tag and walk around school and have the gear. Some people don't care. They wear flip-flops everywhere and just want to get in the dirt and start tackling people. Mm-hmm. And Kip's the former, he or the latter. He is a guy that just wants to get out there and get it done. I mentioned Cortland Guillory before and Eli Bowen. Again, those two guys Eli Bowen had the long pick six against Alabama. And Cortland Guillory was a guy as a true freshman, one of the highest rated isolated cornerbacks in the country last year. Depends on where you look. I like to look at the one that had him rated highest because it helps my argument. So I go with Pro Football Focus. But they'll bring up that he struggled against Cam Coleman. Okay. Water's wet. Defensive players struggle against good receivers. It happens. But he's a guy that's going to have another year of working out, getting bigger, understanding his roles. There were a couple busts that he had, especially against Ole Miss, where he ran too far inside on a couple plays. Look, he's a true freshman. Kewan Lacey took it for a touchdown. It happens. There are a lot of guys that I could keep going on the defense, but really the biggest thing that I think you get from Oklahoma when you look at them this year is they're just very talented everywhere. They have guys are extremely confident at every position, and they all have a lot, and they have them returning, and they're with a coach that, for my money, is, I know people could pick other ones. I think if I'm starting a team and I'm the head coach, Brent Venables is my DC, and I could look at different coaches for offensive coordinator, but it's pretty consistent that he has been the guy at the defensive coordinator position the last, couple, 15 years or so. And I think it's still the same now.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of great things about this defense from you, Chad, and you've certainly been great breaking it down. I will ask, though, if there's going to be a way that an offense you think can try to beat your defense or really get around them to be able to win a game against y'all this season, how do you think that's going to be?
Third down conversions are killers for any defense, especially one that has lost depth on that front. And look, defenses, I think they're going to be really good. Good offenses beat defenses because offense knows where they're going. So when you play really good offenses, like you can look at even I only bring up 2019 LSU just because a lot of people will recognize and know what I'm referencing. Clemson's defense that year was like top 3 in every. Statistically, was Brent's best defense. They were top 3 in every statistical category. They dog walked the round before him, and I cannot recall who it was. I hate that I can't. No, I think they played Ohio State. I don't know if I think they beat them pretty bad, actually, because Trevor Lawrence had that long touchdown run.
Quick pause before I kind of wrap up my channel. If you haven't checked out both channels, if you haven't subscribed, like the video, share it to your friends who love Gamecock and Sooner content. I encourage you to. There's great work coming out from both channels. And then kind of to wrap it up with just the schedule, then before kind of, I guess, final early predictions, if you even want to call it that. I look at Oklahoma's schedule, and I got to say, it's pretty brutal early on. You go to Michigan, you go to Georgia, you have the Red River rivalry, and then the week before you host the Gamecocks, you go on the road to Stark Vegas against Mississippi State. Do you think that's going to have any impact as you roll into late October? And how do you feel about those Brent Venable teams when it comes to, I guess, really just the wear and tear of playing an SEC schedule, especially now that we're heading to a 9-game SEC schedule?
Yeah. So on the first, yes, I do. I think that despite what Kurt Cignetti likes to say, I think that it is a serious detriment when you have a game every week in which you will get beat up and you don't play, the Mickey Mouse schedules that the Big Ten plays, except for the 3 weeks in which they have difficult games. Now, obviously, Cignetti won the Natty. He could say whatever he wants, but doesn't mean he can't be wrong. If he says 2 + 2 is 5, we can call him out on that. He's just incorrect, saying that the Big Ten is as difficult as the SEC. It's just not. That doesn't, but who cares? He won the Natty. He can say whatever he wants. It definitely will have an impact. The Michigan game, to me, if you look at the first 5 games Oklahoma has, well, I guess up into the Texas game, I'll say, the Michigan game to me is the one where I think I will be able to tell how good Oklahoma will be. If we can go to Michigan and I won't even say dominate, but win in a way that is physical, where you can just establish a run game against a good defensive front. It's a big game for us, and it's so big that one of the reasons we moved our season opener to Friday was to have an extra day of rest and prep from the Michigan game. And that is going to be one of the games that I look at most closely is how do we look coming out of that one. The Georgia game, look, I Georgia to me is probably my number one team if I were to pick one, just because it's hard to think a team that's returning almost everybody's going to get worse than they were last year when they won the SEC title as the youngest team in the SEC, second to Oklahoma, and they bring back 70 plus on offense and 81% of their production on defense. They're going to be really, really good. And are they coached well? I don't know. It's just Kirby Smart. So it's one of those teams where if we lose to them, I'll be honest. Okay, I mean that doesn't really mean we won't be good. It doesn't mean we can't make changes. There are teams that I expect us to beat. I think we're better than Michigan. I think we're better than Texas. I think, to be fair with you, I can make a case we should go 11-1. I can make a case we can go 8-4. A lot of those teams are just, you don't know until you see it, especially for a South Carolina or a team that didn't have the year last year, because you really want to see how has that changed. What is the mindset shift difference on for a team like South Carolina? But yeah, it is definitely going to be an issue. And then on the Brent Venables aspect of it, I've been in this debate with my Oklahoma fans for a while. Going back to Cignetti, funny enough, I think he should take the Cignetti approach to practice. I'd have an hour 45 each day. I would have pads 1 day a week. I would have my guys healthy on Saturday and feeling good. You are rewarded for wins. That is all that matters. People get, at the end of the day, all the film, all the extra tech people get, all the money, all of that is to get a W on Saturday. And the best way to get a W on Saturday is to have your best players available. An even better way to get a W is to have your best players available and feeling pretty good. One terrible way to have W's on Saturday is whenever you're playing LSU and on Wednesday your right tackle gets a concussion for practice. Why would that ever happen? My best guess. Your best guess is mine.
Mm-hmm.
That should never happen. And Brent is a guy that is stuck. I wouldn't say stuck. That sounds pejorative. I would say Brent is a guy who is a believer in earning it throughout the practice week and being very physical and hitting and getting all that going. I think there's a time and place for that. I'm tired of Oklahoma always having the, 2 starting linemen out for the first 3 weeks and people saying, wait till week 6 when this guy gets back. And then he gets back and the 3 guys that were starting, one of them is out. And now they're having to switch positions. And now it's week 9 and we haven't had a recurring starting offensive line the whole season. So for me, I'm really hoping Brent looks at it and says, here, I have a lot of guys that are returning. I'm going to lean on my experience and trust the guys that I've developed these last 4 years instead of punishing them and making sure they're getting hits and making sure they're going full speed at practice. Now, you should always practice with intent and intensity. That I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I truly am a believer in once you get in the season, you need to maintain. Maybe obviously you should get better as the season goes along, but you should get better because you're playing in games, and that pressure should make you better in the game. I'm not a big believer in you beat up each other and you full speed tackle and full speed scrimmages in season, because you in the SEC, especially with the added game. And I'm interested in your take on this. I don't want it. I want to get rid of. I want to get rid of all of the big time non-con games. I want to play cakewalks. Give me your worst FCS team the first 3 weeks. I don't care. You get rewarded for wins in this league, not for looking good against bad, not for barely losing. Ask Texas about Ohio State last year.
Mm-hmm.
You get rewarded for wins. Also, I'll be honest. I don't want Oklahoma to make the SEC championship game. I'd rather have the rest.
Mm-hmm.
All that matters. Anyone that tells you different is just lying. All that matters is the playoffs. Once you get to bowl games, all that, where players are sitting out and all that, like the Big Ten does this. Look how many bowl games we won. Yeah, dude. Oklahoma lost when they had 27 starters out. I'll never forget the first when we had played Oregon. Whenever Brent Venables' first year was there, we had like almost 40 dudes that didn't play. It's like, I mean, so all that to me. So if you start from that goal, what is the goal? Get to the playoffs, and you work backwards from that. What's the best way to do that? Well, the committee has told you that just because you're 10-2 in the SEC doesn't mean you're getting in the playoffs. Vanderbilt showed us that last year. They haven't proven that 9-3 team will get in yet. I don't think they like the idea of a 3-loss team getting in the playoffs. So I don't trust them to make that jump for a team like Oklahoma or South Carolina. So I believe you got to go 10-2. You have to have, or at least 10 wins. And having the 9th game for me has made it that much more difficult and that much more. It is that much more important now that you don't beat yourself up throughout the season, especially early in the season, especially through practice, in order to get the 10th win. So that's kind of where I sit on all the Venables needing to make adjustments. That to me is the biggest adjustment he has to make. You have to manage your roster throughout the season a little bit better.
Yeah, you brought some great points up there. When it comes to the 9-game schedule, it when it first came out, not gonna lie, I don't want to say the word embarrassed, but for a lack of a better word, I was kind of embarrassed because it almost felt like we got bullied into doing to making that decision. Because you had that year in 2024, South Carolina goes 9-3, and honestly, it was 10-2. We beat LSU that game. That refs were terrible. And, but we have a bad loss to Ole Miss, okay, and we lose by 2 points on the road against Alabama, right, which ended up finishing as a top 15, top 20 team. And, we beat Clemson, who then goes on to beat SMU, and then SMU makes the playoffs over any of those 9-3 SEC teams. And it's just like there was no reward shown for the strength of schedule played. And a lot of people like to say, well, when you rank all the SEC teams in the top 25, of course they're going to be your best strength of schedule. It's just you just watch the games week in and week out. You can see the difference. Because I pulled up Indiana's schedule. The first half of their schedule, you have North Texas, Howard, Western Kentucky, Northwestern, and then you have back-to-back road games against Rutgers and Nebraska before you host Ohio State. You're really telling me that's the same thing as Oklahoma's schedule, or even South Carolina's schedule? In the first half of our schedule this year is the easiest it's been in probably a decade. Mm-hmm. It's really ridiculous. And
I mean, look at the best way to decide who has the most talent is where does the NFL want their players from? What conference do they go to the most often with the most amount of draft picks? Last year, the SEC had a record of 81 draft picks. That Big Ten was good. They had 61. So even though you have all the, they may make this argument of look how deep we go in the playoffs. I do think a lot of that is they're not as beat up at the end of the year. They get to rest guys like a Jeremiah Smith in the last game of the season. Yep. We don't get to do that in the SEC because you're in a fight typically at the end of the season against good teams. I always say this: Mississippi State gets a lot of the butt of the joke, and then you look at the draft and they have 2 D linemen drafted every year.
Exactly.
They're just they just have big dudes everywhere.
Exactly. you bring up a good point. It's like, South Carolina, we play 10 Power 4 programs this season,
Mhm.
9 SEC and Clemson. And over this offseason, we canceled home and home series with North Carolina, with North Carolina State, with like Virginia Tech. And like, I can't blame them. I can't blame them. Why would I want to play 11 Power 4 games when there's no incentive to play Power 4 games? Like for the fans, I understand the fans. Absolutely, they want to see it, and I do too on a personal level. But
Mhm.
of course, I want to ask the University of South Carolina to play 11 Power 4 games, especially like Indiana just canceled their home and home series against Notre Dame. Um, one quick comment, and then I know you're getting close on time, so I want to ask you really
Oh, yeah, we got
quickly.
time. Yeah.
Okay, you got time? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, we got 5 or so more minutes.
Personally, Billy Cotton 2340 asked, how many games does Shane Beamer have to win to keep his job? Um, I think the answer varies among the South Carolina fan base. Some people will say a bowl game. Other people might say 7 to 8 wins. I personally am of the believer of 8 wins. I think with the talent on this team, you're in year 6 as a head coach. You look at the favorability of our schedule. I mean, the schedule's always tough, but especially I'm referring to the first half here. You don't have you start out with basically 2 preseason games against Kent State and Towson, and then you roll into a home game against Mississippi State. You don't have any back-to-back road games. You're the only team in the SEC with a bye week directly in the middle of your season. Like I get there's tough stretches and it's a tough overall schedule. It's like I think it's the 10th most difficult in the
Mhm.
country when you look at
Mhm.
ESPN rankings. But with the talent on this team, with all the pieces that were supposedly fixed that were holding us back throughout the past couple of years have finally been fixed. It just feels like there's no more, I guess, excuses not to at least reach 8 wins. I think, and I don't think we're going to be having that conversation about Coach Beamer any part of the season or the off season. I think he's going to do some very special things this year. Definitely, I think he's going to get above 8. Haven't set out my official record prediction yet, so I'm going to keep quiet on the exact number. However, 4th in the SEC, you can do the math. Pretty successful. But there's kind of that answer to that comment. Hope that was good for you, Billy. So my last 2 questions for you.
Mhm.
Firstly, when you look at South Carolina, whether it's the offense, the defense, whatever it may be, what are the things that kind of give you a little bit of anxiety heading into that game?
Nick Harbor running a 4.2 at 6'4", 260. I mean, like,
Mhm.
guys like that. No, what worries me if you're Oklahoma has to be it would be an amalgamation of a couple things. One would be if Oklahoma's struggling on offense and you look at South Carolina and their defense is as good as advertised, and Dylan Stewart's doing what Dylan Stewart does, that would be a significant worry. But if I'm just going to have to pick one position or one player, I mean, it's got to be Lenore Sellers. I know Dylan Stewart's on the other side,
Mhm.
but I can handle our offense struggling a little bit because I know our defense is capable to keep us in the game. Sort of like what you said about South Carolina's defense. But if you're getting diced up and Lenoris is getting out on 3rd and longs and converting those, it's just such a worry when you play dual threat quarterbacks that it adds an element to the game that can become almost unfair when they're smart and when they know how to run it. And the biggest thing is he's just experienced. Like he's gone through last year and gone through the struggle. He doesn't, he almost, I would assume he almost has a what do I have to lose kind of mindset now. It's I'm going to let it all free and just go out and play. I'm not gonna. I don't know enough to. I'm not assuming last year was all on him or anything. But it was a year in which I'm sure he's upset how the team played. I'm sure as the quarterback, he takes a lot of that on his shoulders. And I just don't. I hope he doesn't have his prove it game against Oklahoma. Save it for someone else.
Yeah. Certainly, when it comes to Lenoris, yes, you can talk about the supporting cast, the offensive line, the receivers, other than Nick Harbor not taking a step up, the running game, of course,
Mm.
the offensive play calling. However, Norris has admitted to this. Shane Beamer has talked about it. He does need to take a step up, especially as a passer, especially with that pocket presence. I do think part of it that sometimes isn't recognized is Mike Shula tried to force him to be a pocket passing quarterback when that's not Lenora Sellers, right?
Yeah.
But certainly there was a lot of, like you said, John Mateer, some of the receivers like dropping wide open passes that really did they stick with you. I could say the same about a lot of passes from Lenoris that just overthrown. Like it
Mm-hmm.
was that early game against Missouri. I think it was in the first half, and it was Vendravius Jacobs down the middle. Catch it. He's probably, if it's not a
Mm.
touchdown, he's at like the 5-yard line, and then set up for a score. And you just overthrow it by about five yards or so. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
plays like that. It's like you got to make those. But certainly, if Lenoris, if it clicks this year, which I think it will, certainly going to be interesting. And then my last thing, just with the Sooners as a program, as a fan base, as a community, You make the college football playoff last year. You lose to Alabama. From the way you've been talking about the offense, I think you're definitely on the optimistic side. I am personally about the offense stepping up. The defense seems like it's going to be the best it's been under Coach Venables. What's the mentality with the Sooner fan base? Is it I'm not going to say championship or bust, but is it college football playoff or bust? Is it double-digit win season? I mean, what's the mentality, the expectations for Coach Venables?
15-0, win the Natty, and John Mateer win the Heisman. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think it's playoff or bust, certainly. For me, at least. And again, it's not like BB's job is he's not on the hot seat this year, barring just a travesty of a season. But to be, he's gone 6-7, 10-2, 6-7, 10-2. It's time to buck the trend. How do you back up another good season? You got to start showing you can build on those. And he's done what he needed to do. He hired, I haven't even mentioned, Jason Witten as the tight ends coach in the offseason, who is going to be someone who brings in a lot of obviously excellence at that position and is going to help even more. But I think OU fans are really optimistic going into the season. Most of them know that I think at the end of the season finally understood that John was doing really, really well, and then it kind of like the Baker thing. Baker's doing really well with Cleveland, then he injures the left side of his body and he's not as good, and everyone's like, what happened with Baker? It's like, I don't know, maybe he's injured and trying to play. John having the screws in his throwing hand at some point, I think, really did get in his mental, and barring even excluding the mental mistakes he had, I think it really took away from his game in a pretty substantial amount. But for Brent, it is he has the players he needs, he has the coaching staff he needs right now, and he has the experience as a head coach. There's no more of this, look, you're just learning or all that. That's over. That really was over last season too, and he had a good season for it. You got to show that you can continue and build off of good seasons. He hasn't shown that yet. For whatever reason, it just hadn't happened. And for Oklahoma fans, I think for sure you have to make the playoff. I would even say you got to win a playoff game. As good as Oklahoma's been and how many we've been in, we never won one, and it's just frustrating. It's like a vampire on like tofu or something, or like on like only animal blood or whatever it was in Twilight. It's just not sustaining. It's like you're so close to the real thing and getting what you really want, and we just can't get there for whatever reason. And for me, it's just that is the step he has to make as a head coach is, look, do what you're expected to do and do it in a professional way. The players need to mimic that. BV, to his credit, says all the right things, has the right mindset. But for me, get to the playoffs. And I would even say I think it's win one playoff game or bust for me this season.
Yeah, certainly feels like Oklahoma's due for a win here. Got to say, if South Carolina has nothing to do with it, if there's nothing on the line for the Gamecocks, I do happen to see myself pulling for the Sooners. I do like rooting.
Back at you. I'll root for the Gamecocks too.
Yeah.
Except for when we play all.
Yeah. No.
But you can root for OU when we play all. That's cool if you want.
No, I'm good. I'm good. There might be a burnt orange team I might be rooting for. I have a friend who's a Texas fan.
Well, I'm sorry. We all have friends that make mistakes in life. We're there to be for them, though. It's good.
Yeah, no one's perfect. But final prediction, I guess, for lack of better terms, I imagine we'll be talking again before the game starts. Right now, spoiler alert into my schedule prediction that hasn't come out yet. Probably might do it next week or the week after. I do think one of the losses on our schedule is going to be against the Sooners in Norman. Well, I'm guessing you probably say the same thing about the game versus South Carolina. If you had to make an early call from right now.
Yeah, I think OU should win. And it's not that I don't think South Carolina is good. It's really just a reflection of how good I think OU will be. Kind of said the same thing about Michigan last year, and I think the same thing this year with Michigan. But yeah, I think Oklahoma beats South Carolina. And again, it's not that I would be shocked if South Carolina won. You have all the talent in the world to beat anybody, and I just want to see it. I want to see it perform and see how y'all are doing. But even then, I just think Oklahoma right now has the pieces built finally that they should be the team. And and so for me, if they aren't, then I'm going to be, it's going to be a really tough year for Oklahoma fans.
Yeah. Well, it was great having you on. Definitely will be interesting to watch. That the title for that Netflix series, Any Given Saturday, still rings true, and it certainly will ring true in 2026. Any game's going to be a fun thriller to watch. But for those watching, this is Chad Smith from the Oklahoma at the Voice of College Football channel. He's been a great guest today. If you haven't checked him out, follow him on X, follow him on all his socials, as well as subscribe and check out Oklahoma at the Voice of College Football. But I know you have a show pretty soon.
Walker, let me give you – you're about to go to college. Let me give you a piece of advice.
Yes.
When you find a woman that is smarter than you and better looking than you, make her your wife. That not only was good advice, but it rhymed. And my wife is watching right now, and I know she's probably laughing and smiling. So there you go, honey.
Okay, well, to your wife and to you, appreciate you having you on, Chad. Definitely looking forward to the matchup versus the Sooners. Yep. Hopefully we'll talk again. But this was Chad Smith with the Oklahoma at the VOCFB. And thank you for having you on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Boomer.
All right, that was Chad Smith with Oklahoma at the voice of college football. Pleasure to have him on as he gets into his own show. Um, Firstly, before we get into the next segment today, and before that, a special announcement. If you haven't subscribed to South Carolina at the voice of college football, I encourage you to. This is a weekly um, great content, detailed, and we try to keep it fun here at the Voice of College Football on the South Carolina channel for you guys. So if you haven't subscribed, we just passed the 1,000 mark for the South Carolina channel. So certainly a huge milestone. I know the Gamecock community is the best community in all of sports. So if you haven't subscribed, if you haven't liked the video, share it with your friends who also love Gamecock and today happen to be Sooner football content as well. I definitely encourage you to. But if you want more than just weekly shows, check me out on X and Instagram, WG Sports _CFB for by the day, by the hour, and by the minute updates on all things Gamecock football. And if you like this show today, we're doing a special show tomorrow of South Carolina live at the VOCFB. I'll be joined by Chris Marler as we talk the SEC as well as potential breakout candidates for 2026. So if you haven't seen that on my socials already, there's my announcement for y'all. Tune in tomorrow night. I believe it's going to be 7 p.m. Eastern for the start time. Excited to have Chris on. He's a great guest. It's always a fun whenever I'm on his show. He's on my show, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. But wanted to, share my quick announcement here that put out on my socials. However, now it's my first time having this or being a part of this amazing group, as well as being the host of South Carolina, the voice of college football. And that is, I'm extremely excited to announce my internship with Gamecock Central and the On3 Network. I can't be more grateful for this opportunity from Brian Shoemaker and the rest of this amazing team to help learn and work under some awesome members of the Gamecock media. I look forward to learning and contributing to Gamecock Central and having some amazing experiences along the way. So how specifically I will be contributing, of course, that's something we're definitely working on. They've been fantastic working with me and trying to help me out and do and see what I want to do, as well as just how I can contribute for them. So I am working with a Gamecock Central. So just a quick announcement, something I've been very happy about. I'm very excited to share with y'all. And I actually, on that note, had my first media event with coming with Gamecock Central last week. So it felt very surreal to be finally there, like for a press conference, for a press event. And that was Birdies with Beamer. It's an annual golf tournament that Coach Beamer has hosted since he's got here. Excuse me. And after a golf tournament throughout the day with some former players, media members, and coaches, afterwards is a press conference and then just kind of a media gaggle with a lot of the positional coaches. And it was I wasn't there for the entire event. I certainly wasn't playing, not at that level with my golf game just yet. But I was there for the back end for the start of Coach Beamer's press conference, and then I did some interviews with some of the other coaches. With the tournament itself, Sterling Sharp, I believe, is I think he's the best golf player there from what I've heard and from just all the buzz I heard around it. Apparently he's won this tournament, because how they do it is they do like teams of 4, and they'll all tee off, and then the best ball the captain will pick which ball they'll hit from there, and like the worst score you can get is par, and it's basically just who finishes the most under par. And Sterling Sharp and his group has usually won, I think, like 5, 6, or maybe 7 times in a row. But their streak came to an end this year. It was a tiebreaker. It was actually, I think it was like 53 was the score between his group and the group with Peter Burns from SEC Network. They gave it to Peter Burns and his group. So that's why I said the Sterling Sharp streak ended there. Don't know how they decided the tiebreaker, because they just kind of just said, oh, we're just giving it to them. So I'm not sure exactly how they did the tiebreaker, but overall it was fun to see the scores in the competition from everybody there on the golf course. But The most interesting part, obviously, that I was looking forward to and that I imagine a lot of you guys have been looking forward to was hearing the thoughts from Coach Beamer at the press conference. Really his first presser since SEC Media Days. And as we kind of ramp back up into the preseason where his press conferences, players' press conferences, positional coaches, coordinators, press conferences, and in those media events are really going to start ramping up, as they do as you head into the preseason and, of course, the season itself. And I was actually able to interview a few of the coaches with South Carolina and ask them some questions and kind of wanted to just share really kind of my thoughts from what I heard from them and really my takeaways from Birdies with Beamer. First interview I did was with Coach Torian Gray. Very nice, very cool. So if you're watching Coach Gray, it was great talking to you and finally meeting you for the first time. I asked him, the first question I asked him was about Peyton Williams. Now, Peyton Williams, I've talked about on this show at length quite a few times throughout the offseason, especially as we've got closer to preseason camp starting, not only because he's a returning starter in that secondary last year, but because it's a guy who we've seen take a step up for this team on the field and off the field as this offseason has gone by. I mean, this is a guy who obviously he's been a very consistent guy, and that's something Coach Gray noted whenever he's come in, whether it was subbing in for Nicky Manwari in that 2022 year, 2024 against Vanderbilt. I think DQ Smith wasn't able to play that game. Peyton Williams stepped up and did a fine job there. And then last year, he was very consistent, very steady with his performance in that secondary. But, I think off the field, jumping up as a leader, as a player on the field, also as a leader off the field, I think has been an expectation and a hope for Peyton Williams from this coaching staff and from Coach Gray, from Coach White. And I certainly think I think you've seen that. I think a big positive indicator was Peyton Williams being one of the 3 players heading to SEC Media Days. That's something I was very excited. I perked my ears up whenever I saw that. But Coach Gray, when talking about Peyton Williams, just talked about how it's great watching his career grow at Carolina. Very steady. And I think the vibe I got from him, from Coach Gray, was that Peyton Williams is once again going to be a very steadying presence for this secondary, because obviously mistakes can happen here and there. A lot's going on in the secondary. A lot of people say the safety and being a corner are probably the 2 hardest jobs other than quarterback. And it certainly feels like there's a lot to manage. But Peyton Williams being that presence, especially with the young guy, or the maybe not even young, but just new starter opposite of him at the other safety spot. And that's what I asked about him next. I asked him about Jazavian Current specifically. Will he see the field in any sort of capacity this coming season? How's that competition been looking like as they head into preseason camp? And, the vibe I got was that, he told me outright, Jazavian Currents will see the field in some sort of capacity. And I don't think that's any breaking news exactly. You look at talented guys like him, the 4-star recruit from Rock Hill, Julian Walker from Dutch Fork High School in Irmo, the 5-star edge rusher, Noah Clark potentially with that defensive line. Like they're Sequel Patterson as a wide receiver, freshman coming in. Like there's a lot of freshmen on this team who they're just too talented to not have on the field, right? So I don't think that's surprising by any means, but it was interesting just to hear the positivity. You could feel the excitement coming from Coach Gray about Jazavian Currents. But speaking about that competition, though, did talk about David Busey, has had a good offseason. And I think personally, the belief, just from my point of view, is that David Busey will be starting opposite of Peyton Williams week 1 versus Kent State on September 5th at 12:45 p.m. Very excited. Can't wait for Gamecock football. Just can't get here close enough. But that is my expectation for the opposite starter of Peyton Williams against Kent State. Now, would it surprise me if Jazavian Currents potentially ended up taking that starting spot by maybe like week 4, week 5? I think that's possible. Could they? I don't think they'll split snaps necessarily, but is that a thing where that job could be something that's a storyline throughout the season? I think the potential is there. And I don't think I'm alone in that sentiment, at least when it comes from the outside perspective. And then speaking of competitions in that secondary, I also asked him about the nickel competition. He said both Scott and Gerald Kilgore aren't as lengthy as Jalen Kilgore, Gerald's brother who just went to the NFL. But both are very good players, and they bring their own strengths to the position. That was a comment he directly said, bring their own strengths to the position. I thought that was interesting because, I've noted here Quashid Scott, a Sumter native, went to Kentucky and then transfers to Carolina this offseason. He's a little bit better from what we've seen and from, the statistics and kind of pass coverage, right? Kind of helping in that pass coverage. But Gerald Kilgore has kind of been more physical, I would say, in a lot of ways, kind of similarly to his brother, who's definitely a good run stopper and a very physical, lengthy tackler on the field. Now, Gerald Kilgore certainly can make plays, against receivers and, against quarterbacks. You saw that pick six against Kentucky, for example. But it was interesting to note that there's different strengths to them. Now, whether different situations you start in different ones, not sure about something like that. However, it's going to be interesting to see which strengths they choose to prioritize whenever they choose the starter for week one against Kent State and how that progresses throughout the season. Because, if it's Quashid Scott, starting at the nickel spot, it'd be hard. It's just hard to say that Gerald Kilgore isn't going to see the field this season. It seems like he's too talented. He has to find a way somewhere. Same thing with Quashid. I mean, you bring in a guy through the transfer portal from another SEC school who did some nice things for the Wildcats. It just feels like you have a lot of guys who you'd be surprised if they didn't see the field in some sort of capacity. So that's what I talked about with Coach Gray, with Coach Money, the linebackers coach. I think, and obviously I've been very high on this linebacker room, not only with the coaching from Coach Money and a coach, defensive coordinator and / linebackers coach for a while, Clayton White. The linebackers here have a lot of potential. They could be like very, very good. You return your three starters, Sean Murphy, Fred Johnson, and Justin Okoronkwo. And I asked Coach Money about that. And, what he said specifically was for this defense and for the linebacker room is the positive thing about having three returning starters rather than three new guys starting like we did in 2025, which is the confidence you had in the linebacker room. With three guys returning who've all started a full season against SEC competition. And, he also noted how multiple the defense can be as a whole with confident and competent guys at linebacker spot. And I don't think that's necessarily something new. It's definitely a positive thing to hear. But, it comes down to those linebackers being that glue in between the secondary and that defensive line. And we have guys who are versatile, who are, competent, confident. It's nice to have guys like that where it just feels like you can have them make plays all over the field, not in just certain situations or certain aspects. And, one of the traits he saw in the linebacker room, he said this immediately. He said this like basically before I could even finish the question, was speed. He said one of the things that the trait he saw out of this linebacker room was speed. So that's just even more evidence of the playmaking and the potential that we could have at South Carolina in the linebacker room this season. And it makes me feel even more confident about this linebacker room. It makes me feel more confident about this defense because, I've talked about the defense in 2025. Yes, they had their certain issues. The stopping the run was certainly an issue, especially early in the season, like that game against Missouri was a big example of that. When it comes to the secondary, it feels like when those DBs were put on an island, which, they are quite a lot under Coach White, like against Virginia Tech, against Clemson, in certain situations, it just felt like those guys were getting beat. But I have noted that with the returning production this season, with returning starters like Fakari Swain, Judge Collier, who should be back to full health, with your returning linebackers, Dylan Stewart coming back, shouldn't have that back injury anymore. You bring in talent for the defensive line, who Coach Beamer said publicly it's about maybe 6 to 7 deep. Like that's how much talent and starting ability they have. The D tackle spot. Safety with Peyton Williams returning some guys they have a lot of positivity about, at the safety spot opposite of Williams. It feels like, you combine all those things with the fact that with what should be a much more competent offense this year, the defense isn't going to be on the field as much. Because I certainly think, with how much they had to be on the field last year with a lot of the situations they were put in, it feels like if the offense fixes their issues, it's, subsequently going to help the defense in a lot of ways I think people took maybe not have realized during 2025. And then the next person I talked to was Clayton White. I said to him the defensive tackle room is the most overlooked on defense. I think that's a common sentiment. I think that's a sentiment that can be backed up pretty easily. And Coach White did agree that they are being looked. It's one of the, and yeah, I think he said they love being overlooked. They play better that way. And he said it's one of his better rooms in size, type, SEC ready guys. He feels great about the players and coaching. So I'm talking about that room that's 6 to 7 players deep. Like it's the potential is there. Chad was talking about how his defensive line, they just have guys upon guys who can come up and make plays. That's a part of what their good defense was in 2025. It just feels like there's a lot of similarities with what he was talking about and with our defensive tackles. And, I'm not meaning guys who were here in Columbia last year. I mean, you have guys like Gabriel Brownlow Indy, like Troy Pikes, but you bring in guys who have played college football. Tamim Waduro, I think I'd be pleasant or guess decently surprised if he wasn't a starter. He seems to be, excuse me, he seems to be making has a lot of potential. He's made some noise, like Illinois, where he transferred from. He did some nice things there last season. You bring in guys like Jordan Thomas as well, a young guy, and Noah Clark. You have guys like Caleb Williams as well, who got fortunately was able to see the field with injuries and stuff. It just feels like there's a lot of guys in this room. Batman Gummies 5393 said, is most of our defense returning? So South Carolina ranks 5th in returning production when you look at ESPN and Bill Conley's rankings. When it comes to defensively, they return 61% of their production, which is 30th in the country. I don't know the exact SEC ranking. It's certainly one of the better ones in the SEC, but that most of the defense is returning this year, other than really Brian Thomas Jr., DQ Smith, or really Nick Barrett. Those are really the guys, the marquee names that left and went on to the NFL. And then lastly, with one more note on Clayton White. He said, I asked him, will Julian Walker and Xavier Currents make an impact as a freshman? Kind of an obvious question. Wanted to hear from him his thoughts on those two players who have been two guys I've been talking about quite a lot, and I think a lot of the South Carolina fan base has been talking quite a lot about. He said they're very mature physically, mentally, and he thinks, and he said maybe they'll be on the field week 1. There's a very good chance they will be on the field week 1 versus Kent State. Now, of course, whether it's, the first snap of the game for the defense, whether it's we're up 35-0, 42-0, and then they come on the field. Either way, I've said it's like 2 preseason NFL games. The 2 games, the first 2 games of our schedule against Kent State and Towson. Hopefully, our offense can, run up the score a pretty good bit and let our twos come in. And if Julian Walker and Xavier Currents are a part of the first teams, then it'll be interesting to see what they can do and what we can see out of them once we get to see them on the field. And certainly that'll be important for the coaches to see as well. And lastly, with Coach Furry, he noted about this offense. I asked him about what was it like having Kendall Briles come in? What's the experience been with Coach Briles as you guys are working on this new offense? And he said learning the new offense has been really fun, allows the players to be free and play ball. And I feel like that's been a theme specifically with Lenore, just letting him play free, a little more free this season than last year, where it just felt like he was trying to force too many things, forced to be a pocket passer in a lot of scenarios or situations. So that's something we've heard pretty much throughout the entire offseason, being more free with this offense, just going out there playing football, and the guys are having a lot of fun with it. And another thing he noted is, Nick Harbor is obviously the number one guy in terms of that's the guy who's getting the most attention, right? He's a national name. He's an SEC level name, and that's the name that defenses and defensive coordinators are really going to be looking out for when it comes to the receiving room. And certainly, especially early in the season, Nick Harbor is going to basically be a magnet for all that attention from the defense. But he made a great point that you have to have all 3 wide receivers should be able to make plays and step up. All of them should be able to help out each other via not letting the defense just put in all their attention on one guy. And I think that's a key for, in a lot of ways, for Nick Harbor's success for this passing attacks offense. Like 2022, it was really Juice Wells was your main guy. You could throw in Josh Van as well. 2023 was Xavier Legette. 2024, Nick Harbor he was starting to step up. Delvon Campbell, but primarily it felt like your main guy was Josh Simon. And then in 2025 last year was obviously Nick Harbor being that guy. And it felt like in a lot of those seasons, if you didn't have that guy open, if he wasn't able to make that play, then it kind of felt like, oh crap, where are we going next? Right? Like you just didn't know, and you kind of had to hope for the best, from the outside perspective. And you've seen this with Coach Biles' offenses in the past. Like you go look at the receiving stats in his time at TCU. I think for most of the years there, the receptions and the receiving yards are pretty evenly spread out among like usually 3 to 4 guys. And I think that's something that we're going to see a little bit more this year. We're not going to have one receiver having 1,500 receiving yards and, everybody else has maybe 100 yards, maybe 200 yards, something like that. I think it's going to be a situation where, Nick Harbor, I think Nick Harbor will be the leading receiver in yards and receptions, no doubt. But, Jaden Sellers is going to have 400 or 500 yards. Donovan Murph could have 400 or 500 yards. DJ Black, Jaden Gibson, Nitro Tuggle, whoever it is. There's going to be more than just one person in this receiving room that defenses and defensive coordinators are going to have to look out for. And I think that benefits all of them. It benefits Nick Harbor when the defense can't just assume you're the number one threat on the play. It helps all those other guys step up. Jaden Sellers, Nitro Tuggle, Donovan Murph, whoever it may be on the field week 1 against Kent State, whoever we see, it helps. It will definitely help when the defense can't just assume it's going to your primary guy. And I think that's something we've seen a little bit too often, unfortunately, with offenses in the past under Coach Beamer. But like I've said on the show quite a few times, I feel like I've made it pretty obvious. I think I have a strong belief, I think just like a lot of people, that this offense is going to be night and day compared to what we've seen from South Carolina in the past. So those are my notes from the Birdies with Beamer event. Very excited as my first media event. It felt very surreal. I looked to my right, and Coach Beamer is 20 feet away talking on 107.5 the game. And then, while they're eating food and everything, I just have like 7 or 8 coaches. Coach Travion Robertson sits down at our table with the Gamecock Central guys. It felt very surreal. It's a very exciting step in my journey of covering college football and South Carolina football. Once again, very grateful to Gamecock Central for this internship opportunity. And thank you to all of you for watching today. We've had a pretty fun show having Chad Smith from Oklahoma at the VOCFB come on and talk this Gamecocks versus Sooners. Once again, check out his channel if you haven't already. And then, of course, breaking down Birdies with Beamers. I do believe I will be at the media event right before preseason camp starts this Thursday. So looking forward to that. I'm pretty sure I should be there this Thursday. So looking forward to that. But once again, check out Chad Smith at Oklahoma at the VOCFB. And if you haven't subscribed to South Carolina at the Voice of College Football, I encourage you to. If you enjoyed the show today, if you enjoyed the detailed breakdown of South Carolina football today against the Sooners, with our preseason expectations, definitely encourage you to subscribe. Just reach the 1,000 subscriber milestone. I know the South Carolina community is the best in all of sports. If you haven't subscribed, like the video, turn on your notifications, share it with your friends who also love football content. I encourage you to. But if you want more than just weekly shows, I encourage you to follow me on X and Instagram, WGSports_CFB. The username is just right below my name right here in the white box, WGSports_CFB, for by the day, by the hour, and by the minute updates on all things Gamecock football. And then right before I leave, just a reminder, tomorrow, doing something special. We're having the next episode of South Carolina Live at the VOCFB with Chris Marler. Great guy. I always love to have him on. It's always fun whenever we talk South Carolina and SEC football. So tomorrow night, I think 7 p.m. is the goal there. Me and Chris will be talking some more Gamecock football. So that was South Carolina Live, episode 65 at the VOCFB. Hope you enjoyed the show. I'm your host, Walker Gaskins. Have a good night and go Gamecocks.